Hey everybody, it's your girl Mama Deb, and we are here tonight to talk about another mental health issue. I'm going to give everybody like a few minutes to get in here and join us so they can enjoy the whole show. I hope everybody's having a great day, a great week since the last time I was on the air. And I hope that you are hanging on and having a fabulous day. If not, reach out, talk to somebody, and get the support that you need for your day. It's the best way to go. So you guys, when we talk about mental health, it should be part of the conversation for any professional or elite athlete. So many people get so distracted on the fact that they're physically fit. Well, part of being physically fit or being an elite athlete has to be your mental health. You have to be able to really sync up the body and the mind, because your mind can be your biggest enemy. And that's something that a lot of athletes have dealt with in the past. So let me read you off something here. Mike Tyson, Chloe Kim, Lindsey Vonn, Ali Rasmussen, Serena Williams, Terry Bradshaw, Naomi Osaka, Michael Phelps, Dwayne Johnson, Junior Seau, Ronda Rousey, Damar DeRozan, Amanda Beard, Abby Wambach, and Ricky Williams. Other than being elite athletes, what do these people have in common? They have struggled with their mental health. Every single one of them have struggled with their mental health. They have been chastised and told to buck up. They've been fined for not being able to attend press conferences or being able to respond in what they consider an appropriate manner at a press conference. And they have been judged by the public for the issues that they've had with their mental health. It seems to be that the belief is that if you're an elite athlete, you have to compete on that physical level no matter what. No matter if it hurts you, no matter if it makes you cringe inside, no matter if you're abused, no matter what the circumstances are, you have to just stuff your feelings, stuff your mental health, and you have to just get on with it. So tonight, we're going to take a look at some of the more dramatic cases of athletes with mental health and how things have changed since the 1980s. In the 80s, 20-year-old Mike Tyson became the heavyweight champion of the world. What people didn't know back then was he had been struggling with his own mental health since about the age of 10. He lived with a very physically abusive mother and a not physically abusive, but a more like a just do what you got to do type of grandmother. When he met his first manager, he was given a father figure that he really needed, and he made him act right. You know, you have to take this, you have to yes sir, you have to yes ma'am, you don't act disrespectful, none of that stuff. After the loss of his manager, we all know what happened. Mike Tyson went off the absolute deep end. He started partying too hard, trying to take away his pain with alcohol and pills, sex with random strangers, because why not? He's the heavyweight champion of the world. Everybody wanted a piece of Mike Tyson. Everybody, including Don King. Don King did not provide that father figure that his first manager did. And I'm sorry, I know his first name is Nick, but I always mispronounce his last name, so I'm not going to try. So he went on an absolute downward spiral. So now here we are years later, and you know what happened in the 80s when he had a downward spiral and went off the rails and got on some antidepressants? The public made a funny song about it. I'm on the Zoloft, and that's why I don't try to kill you. That was the public response to Mike Tyson's bipolar diagnosis. It wasn't, hey, let's help him. No, it was not, hey, let's embrace him. It was, he is the heavyweight champion of the world, or was, and he needs to just suck it up and perform at the level he's been expected to perform at. Mike Tyson has in these years since that has been reported to say that he never felt worthy. He was a scared little boy who didn't know what he was going to do in the world. And the only thing he knew was to fight. That's all he knew. Can you imagine in 2022 if we have a 20-year-old Mike Tyson spiral like he did back then? We wouldn't be doing any of the things we did back then. We wouldn't be throwing him away like he was nothing. People would have been reaching out going, oh boy, let's get him to get right. You know, face tattoos, biting off a man's ear, rape. That I'm not saying he's innocent of it. I'm not saying that's an excuse for his crimes, but it makes sense when you look at the downward spiral that he was actually on as an unmedicated bipolar patient. So you have to start looking at the way that the world has changed, and that will actually make this conversation a little bit better, because in 1980, we had no idea. Mental health was in the closet. Nobody talked about it. Suicide was running rampant, but nobody talked about it because it was a personal issue that families kept in the closet. One of the most difficult things that we saw later in the 90s was the tragic death of Junior Seau. Now, Junior Seau plays for the I'm going to get this wrong, San Diego Chargers, I believe. And he had what we now know as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. What that basically is that he had concussion after concussion after concussion as a professional football player. And it caused trauma, long-lasting trauma to his brain that was with him long after his playing days. And it's been proven now, and honestly, I'm going to give a lot of credit for Junior Seau, because unfortunately, he tried to kill himself once and he drove off a cliff and was unsuccessful. And they asked him, why would you do that? He's like, I want to die, and science needs to study my brain because there's something wrong with me. Unfortunately, he was successful in his suicide attempt the second time, where he shot himself in the chest. And they did study his brain. And from studying his brain, we figured out a lot of things about CTE. First thing that we figured out is the first stages of CTE present themselves as a mental health disorder, such as depression, anxiety, impulse control, and aggression. Wow, doesn't that sound like somebody else that I just talked about? Yes, Mike Tyson probably has CTE as well. Well, we can't prove it because the only way we can prove it is through autopsy, unless somebody has come up with something that I am unaware of. And if there is some type of research that I don't know about, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear about it and get the most updated information on it. So then when CTE comes into place, after that, then they unfortunately start to experience things like dementia, Alzheimer's type symptoms, and really, without going into too much medical stuff, the brain basically kind of turns to mush and it begins to die off. Jim McMahon. You all know Jim McMahon. If you're old enough, you know the Super Bowl shuffle, the Chicago Bears, all of those, that song. Oh, that song. Anyway, he can't leave his own home without put in directions so that he can find his way back, because he forgets where he lives. That's CTE. That is, and we've talked about it on his 30 for 30 sports series on ESPN, where he's talked about how depressed he was after retiring from football, because he was an elite athlete. His body was a temple. He treated it with such, reverence, and did everything he needed to do. And then he found himself without an identity, because he was no longer Jim McMahon, the football player. He was Jim McMahon, the retired football player, who is now sad and depressed and lacked an identity because he didn't train his mind. He didn't give mental health the proper place that it needed and the feelings that it needed towards keeping him whole. When we're talking about those athletes suffered not only the mental health disorders, but they also suffered the criticism of public opinion. Well, if he was this, well, if he did that, well, why didn't he just say something? Because those type of people, those athletes, were put on such a pedestal that when they did say something, the public criticized them. Their own families probably did, their managers. I don't know for sure about that personal detail, but it happens with anybody who has a mental health disorder. People criticize. And when you're held at such a level with so much pressure put on you, it is unimaginable the amount of pressure people will put on you. Just go one more play. Just push through your fear of failure and just throw the football one more time. It takes its toll on the athlete as a whole. When we start getting into the later years, like 2019, 2020, we saw a huge shift in the way that people treat athletes with mental health disorders. The first and foremost, Michael Phelps, 28 medals, the most decorated Olympic athlete ever, okay? Ended up, after he retired from the Olympics, he ended up getting suspended from world competition for 6 months for his first DUI. He then got a second DUI, was doing drugs, trying to mask the pain that was going on. And unbeknownst to him, it wasn't a physical pain. It was a mental health pain that was manifesting itself physically. And after a second DUI, he contemplated suicide. Now, I'm sure there are people out there right now going, what the hell did he have to be sad about? He lost his entire identity. He was Michael Phelps, the Olympic elite athlete, the greatest Olympic athlete in U.S. history. And now he was Mike Phelps, the dad and husband. Now, when you're thinking about it, you're like, well, God, he still has a great life. He's got 3 kids. He's got a beautiful wife. He's got all these things. Yes, he does. But he had to take a step back, check himself into in-house treatment, and get his mental health right, because he could not be the daddy he is today and the husband he is today had he not taken stock and said, I am running out of control. When he thought about killing himself, he is quoted in an article as saying that I never knew that after winning and being the greatest, I would feel like this, and I would feel so useless. He had no training. He didn't do anything other than be an Olympic swimmer. He didn't have any job training. That was what his life was, and it's gone. And he retired, and he's glad he retired. He's physically glad he retired, but mentally he's taking a really big hit. And when he started coming out about mental health disorders in elite athletes, we noticed that people started doing a lot of research. And it is estimated that up to 42% of elite athletes or elite retired athletes are struggling with some form of mental health. Every single person that I read at the beginning has openly come out and talked about the issues that they have with mental health disorders post their athletic career or during their athletic career, and then worsen post-retirement. These mental health disorders that they're talking about commonly include depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicidal thoughts. Okay, these are things that people battle with. Let's look at a couple of them that battled with it during their career. Let's see, Chloe Kim, Lindsey Vonn, Naomi Osaka, and Serena Williams. All of them battled with depression and anxiety during their careers. They still are, some of them are still active. Serena Williams, I believe she just retired. But she and Naomi Osaka were both fined and put on probation for their sport because they would not attend post-event press conferences. And when they were asked, why won't you do this? Naomi Osaka was very open with, these people are like leeches. They're like sharks. They just come at you with every single mistake that you made in a match, and they want you to go over it over and over and time again. Well, you did this, and shouldn't you have done this, and what about this? You're like, well, Jesus Christ, I thought I did okay, but now I'm being torn down by people who don't know anything about the sport. I must be really bad at it. So she said she could not do those press conferences anymore, and she had to skip them for her mental health. And they still fined her. They said, nope, you're going to have to come. Serena Williams, same thing. They find her for the same reason. She's like, I just can't do it. It's not good for me, and it's not good for my mental health. Those kinds of things are being heard more and more lately, and it's a good thing that we're hearing them nowadays. Because if you do remember this little NFL player called Ricky Williams, Ricky Williams was basically, his football career was flushed down the toilet because he had such severe social anxiety that in order to even get out on the field and play when he knows there's cameras, he had to smoke pot to get himself calmed and centered. We now know that smoking marijuana actually does benefit the person with social anxiety. It does allow for them to go out in public and lead a more normal life. This is a gifted athlete who was basically kicked out of the NFL because he smoked pot. Because when it happened, they still considered marijuana a performance-enhancing drug. The only thing that marijuana enhances is your craving for cereal. It does not enhance you athletically. It makes you chilled out. It makes you to be able to get through a situation of great mental anguish or mental struggle and kind of look at it a little bit from a little bit of a different perspective. Ricky Williams' physical health was because of his ability to do what he did and how hard he worked. But yet his career was short-lived because of the way things that were in society at that time. So what you have to, the other thing we need to look at is like, let's look at how, let's look at the 2020 Olympic Games. The 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo brought across, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. I should not skip ahead. First thing I want to talk about first is Allie Rasmussen. Allie Rasmussen is a gold medal winning Olympic gymnast. Her career was cut short because she could not take the stress, the mental health stress anymore because of the alleged sexual abuse that happened during by the doctor of the women's gymnast team. These aren't women, okay? A lot of these gymnasts are very young girls because of the way the sport is. And she's been diagnosed with PTSD and depression anxiety since that incident happened. Her career probably could have gone on a few more years than it did, but she could not focus on what was happening and get into the game physically because she had so much going on mentally. This was not advertised. This was not brought into the public eye until much later when the trial actually happened and all these girls had to testify. It was just like, oh, she retired. It was pushed under the rug. That's not something that we need to be doing with people who have mental health disorders. We need to bring it up, put it out there, and be supportive of them. At the 2020 Olympics, Chloe Kim, Naomi Osaka, and Simone Biles all said, I can't because I cannot mentally get it together. Simone Biles came out of the hardest hit controversy because everybody's like, well, Simone Biles is this bomb gymnast. She's going to bring home the gold for the U.S. Yes, she's a bomb gymnast. She's an amazing athlete. That is fantastic. Absolutely 100%. However, when an athlete goes to the coaches and goes to their teammates and said, I can't even get myself motivated to get out of bed. I need to take a step back and give the alternate her time to shine because I will drag you down. That should be respected. That should be like, you know what? You are a team player. You're absolutely, thank you for being honest with us. And let's support you in this decision. That may have happened with her teammates. In fact, I'm almost positive that it did. But what happened to the public opinion, the court of public opinion is, how dare she? She is an Olympic athlete. She is a symbol of our nation. How dare she say that she mentally cannot do this? Pull yourself up by your leotard and get your ass in the game and compete at this level. What? I heard some of the most awful comments about Simone Biles. And not even 24 hours before, she was the golden girl of women's gymnastics in the United States. She is still a golden girl. She is still an amazing gymnast, but right now she's also an amazing human being who took her teammates into consideration and said, I can't do this. I'm not where I need to be mentally to put in the performance that I need to put in. And I think that is the key when we're talking about mental health and the athletes, because what people don't understand, and it happens all of us with mental health issues, what they don't understand is that mental health problems cause real life physical symptoms. When you try to get out of bed, and this is from personal experience, and it's too freaking much, and you're having a 45-minute conversation with yourself, like you can do this. You can just put one foot off the side of the bed, and you're going to sit up, and then you can go forth and one step at a time, and you can't do it. There are physical symptoms. Not only am I depressed, not only am I sad, but I feel physically unable to complete that task. Now, and y'all, I'm a 5'2", overweight, 52-year-old woman. I am not these elite athletes who have all these demands that they put on their bodies to perform at a certain level. If you can't talk yourself into getting out of bed, how do people actually expect you to perform at the level that they have come to think is commonplace for you? It just doesn't work. It does not work. But instead of being supportive and getting these athletes the type of putting it out into so everybody knows, you have to treat these athletes as a full person, mental health, physical health, all of it has to be considered into one picture. Their nutrition, all of it, because you cannot have a well-oiled machine if you neglect one of the parts. And neglecting the mental health of anyone, and in this case, we're talking about athletes, is absolutely asking for disaster. It is asking for disaster because one day it is going to catch up with them. And one day they're going to say, I'm done. I don't want to compete anymore. I don't want this to be my life. And in the next week, month, whatever it may be, they're going to wake up and realize their entire identity is gone. Their purpose for getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to train is gone. So how do you deal with that? This is the question that I'm posing, is because so many athletes just spiral downhill into this horrible depression and anxiety, suicidal tendencies. Those who have possibility of having CTE, it becomes even worse. Okay, so you have to be aware of this as a family member of these athletes, or as the American public supporting our athletes, that this is something that has to happen. Let's see. I lost my place on notes. I'm sorry. So when we were talking about, there are some athletes that have admitted they have struggled with mental health their entire life, but it became worse when they retired, such as Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw has openly admitted that he has had major depressive disorder since he was like 22 years old. Had it the whole time he was playing football, was able to manage it however they did. Problem is, we have to look at the fact that Terry Bradshaw did what many athletes did during their careers to help deal with their mental health problems, as they turned to alcohol and drugs. And that numbed them. Don't have a whole lot of concerns in the world when you are numb. Okay? Abby Wambach. Wambach? Yeah. One of the, I love her. I love how she stands for females in sports. I love everything about it. But she readily admits that towards the end of her career, she became addicted to pain medicine, and she started drinking very heavily to deal with the effects that the possibility of retirement were having on her. We're all people. We all face these kinds of pressures in our life. But can you imagine, because I cannot imagine doing it on the podium in front of the entire world watching you. Because gosh forbid that we have we have our meltdown on stage. Andrew, the reason that this topic came up is because I was looking into Michael Phelps' foundation that he has started to help with elite athletes transitioning back into the real world. And my husband goes, hey, do you remember when Mike Tyson had his meltdown? And he goes, this is what happened in America then. And they put out a song about, I'm on the Zoloft, so I won't kill y'all. And laughed about it and joked about it and said, whatever. Of course he's angry. Nobody said, this man has bipolar disorder and we should be maybe doing something to help him. And I just was really interested in the progression of the way that people see mental health disorders in our athletes today compared to back in the 80s when Mike Tyson had his meltdown. And I'm sure everybody who's of any age, like my age, will know that that meltdown was absolutely crazy to watch him melt down. So then, so Michael Phelps, we'll get back to him. I'm sorry. Nope. I lost my train of thought again. Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey she's probably one of the most, if not the most famous female MMA fighter out there. She was the first woman to sign with the UFC and to actually bring women's combat sports to the forefront. She readily admits that she had issues with depression while she was fighting in the UFC. And again, we can fall back onto maybe some possible CTE here because she did get hit in the head quite a bit. But she said that when she retired and then went over to professional wrestling, she really struggled with the difference between MMA, and I'm beating the crap out of people, to professional wrestling, where it's all fake. And she really had a hard time getting that together and making it, because people are like, oh, MMA must be fake because look what Ronda Rousey's doing now. MMA is not fake. Professional wrestling is fake. However, you still have to be somewhat athletic to pull off some of the crap that they pull off. And she credits her husband and her therapist with saving her life because she just wanted to die. When people started doubting her abilities as an MMA fighter because she went to professional wrestling, she said she was very suicidal and credits her husband with saying, I think there's something wrong here. I think we need to talk to you. You need to talk to a therapist and maybe consider getting on some medication. So it's interesting that a combat sport like boxing, we laughed at somebody in the 80s. Here in the 2000s, 2020s, when she retired, I believe, we're actually going, you know what? That's understandable. It's understandable that we as a society are going, you know what? Mental health is real. We need to take a bigger and larger look at some of the things that we are accepting or laughing at or not putting up with. The other thing is that when we're talking about these athletes, and this was another reason that I really wanted to bring this up, is because these athletes are put on pedestals. They're made role models whether they want to be or not. You know, how many times did you watch the Olympics when you was a little girl or a little boy and go, I want to do that. I want to be like that person. How many young men are out there going, I want to play football. I want to play basketball. I want to do this professionally. If we're not real about the way that and the things that happen in a professional athlete's life or elite athlete's life, then how do we protect our kids? How do we teach our kids that it's okay to not be okay? And that's one of the lines that Simone Biles used in 2020, is that we need to accept the fact that it is okay not to be okay. And how do we explain that to our children? They're looking up to all these athletes, and these athletes are all this great thing. And then they have this mental crash, and it plays out in the public eye, and everyone is like, oh, shit. You know, my favorite basketball player growing up was Magic Johnson. Hands down, it was Magic Johnson. Greatest point guard in Laker history, in my opinion. Absolutely freaking amazing. They had, when he came out and said he was HIV positive, I cried. And I was an adult, and I cried. I thought, what a waste. What a waste of such a gifted athlete. then I began to think like, well, what do you mean? Like, what a waste. He's still here. He's still alive today. His wife and son are not HIV positive. Okay. And they were conceived when he was, his son was conceived when he was positive. So it was very possible that happened. Can you imagine the things that must have been going through his head or the head of all the little boys and girls who wanted to be like Magic Johnson? They wanted to grow up. They wanted to do all the things that Magic Johnson was doing. I want to play basketball. I'm going to be a professional. Okay, realistically, I'm 5'2". I had no hope in hell of playing point guard for the Lakers, but I still looked up to the man, and I still went out and practiced every single day to try to get better because that man did that. So when you see things like that happen, and he readily admits he sunk into a terrible, terrible depression afterwards, and then he pulled his, decided, I'm done. I can't be like this. He got help. He went to therapy, and he started speaking out on the effects of, safe sex. You got to talk about it. If you're going to go around doing what you're doing when you're a professional athlete, because we all know it's getting thrown at them left and right, you got to be responsible. You gotta take into consideration not just the moment, but responsibility and how it could affect the rest of your life. That's the lesson that Magic Johnson put out for the public to know. That, and he tried to take the stigma away from being HIV positive. It's not a death sentence anymore. Back then, it was considered a death sentence. So, there's so many things that we can evolve from these, we can learn from these athletes and their situations that we really need to be open and honest about what they're going through as well. And Aunt Jur, a synchronized swimmer. Do you know the rate of bulimia in synchronized swimmers is only second to that in gymnasts and jockeys? Those are the three types of sports that the highest rate of bulimia is. Because you're required to have a certain figure, to look a certain way, to make this beautiful picture with your teammates. They have to hold their breath for such a long amount of time. I read it was 3 minutes, but I'm like, damn, that's a long time. But I don't know that that's actually true. It might be longer because these are healthy young women who have been doing this sport probably for a long time. But a mental health disorder, an eating disorder, it's something that they have accepted as part of their life as to be that kind of an athlete. So what do you do when you're not that athlete anymore? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with your inability to have a healthy relationship with food? Your inability to look at yourself in the mirror and go, okay, well, you gained 10 pounds. That doesn't mean anything, but I can already hear it inside them calling themselves fat. Their coaches or their parents or whoever, the public, fat shaming them for gaining a couple of pounds. This is stuff that this is the pressures that professional and elite athletes are under every single day. And it's not something that we think about, I don't think per se, but I think that using people who are out in the public eye to draw more attention to mental health disorders is a good thing. It is something we should be doing. We should absolutely be supporting these people because they're human beings. Let's take a look at, and again, this was back in like 88, Len Bias. I don't know if y'all remember Len Bias. He was a college basketball player. He got drafted by the Celtics. Old boy had his ticket. It was written. He was getting ready to punch it. And he went to a party, did some cocaine, and ended up dropping dead on the basketball court of a massive heart attack. I'm sure that there's more details to that, but that's all I can remember. I think he might have had a heart defect that they didn't know about. But mental health disorders create the same problems as that does, as going out and partying too hard because you've already punched your ticket to the NBA. Okay? You played your games. You stopped. You're done. Now you're clocking out and you're going to retire and have a good life. Where's the excitement? Where's everything that you've been feeding off for the last 20 years, we'll say? The roar of the crowd, people chanting your name, okay? It is something that becomes addicting. And addiction, as we all know, is not only a physical disorder, but it has mental health costs as well. So I think what I'm trying to get at, you guys, is that you know how big of an advocate I am. And you know, I come on here every week and I talk about mental health disorders. I talk about how important it is that we support each other and how important it is that we be there for each other. Is it not equally important that we share the truth of these people that we idolize? Is it not equally important that we share that they have a mental health disorder? They have been open and honest about it. Is it not equally important that we embrace them as their fans and say, hey, right on, thank you for being honest. And you know what? You probably helped a lot of people today by coming out and talking about this. It is equally important. It is that hard. It is that important that we do this kind of stuff, because you never know the person who is smiling and laughing and having a great time. That's a facade. That's an absolute facade. And you know, being a professional athlete, there are a lot of highs. But can you imagine if you have the highest of highs and the next day you have to wake up and realize what I wanted, what I worked my entire life for, did not happen. The amount of depression that they must feel is unreal. But nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about that letdown. And we all have it every day in our life. And I'm not saying they're any better than anybody else, okay? They're the same, they're people. But I'm saying that they can use their platform of fame to really make a difference in the awareness of mental health in this country. And we've come such a long way since the 80s. We have come such a long way. We still struggle. People still don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the stigma that's attached to it, because, you know, you have guys who are making millions of dollars a year as professional athletes, and women that are, well, not millions, because women are grossly underpaid in the professional athletic area. But they come out and, you know, they have all these sponsors and everything like that. And they come out, I have a mental health disorder. In the 80s, they would have been dropped from all of their sponsors. There goes all those millions of dollars, because they chose to come out and talk about it. Or it happened on the, right in front of the public, you know, you had a very public meltdown. Those kind of things now don't happen as much because because it's more in the forefront. There's more people talking about. There's more people. Yes, and that's absolutely true, Andrew. Statistically speaking, lots more people will fail to make that jump to elite athlete than will succeed. It is absolutely correct. And Mange, you're right. You can have $1 million and still feel worthless. You can be like Michael Phelps. You can be a 28 medal athlete and still feel like your life doesn't have meaning. You know? And I think the best thing that Michael Phelps did was to come out and say, I have this struggle. And he has made a foundation that helps athletes transition from being an athlete, that's what they do for a living, to functioning back into real life. Because let's be honest, training and all of that stuff for one goal, to be in the Olympics, that is not real life. But to be left floundering to try to figure out real life has got to be so difficult. It's difficult enough sometimes to, like I said, get out of bed, pay your bills, smile, go out with friends, enjoy my life, enjoy your life. But when you feel that pressure of worthlessness, and my whole life up until this point has been to achieve this thing, and I achieved it, now what the hell do I do? That is an absolute, I think that would be absolutely devastating. And I just, you know, I think the main thing that I want to remind everyone of is that if you know somebody who falls in this category, who is an elite athlete, who has, you know, they're a college athlete and they graduated from college, and, you know, they have a normal job now. They don't do the athletics every day. Check on them and make sure that they are okay. Because saying, hey, are you doing all right, over the phone, it's easy to hear, yeah, I'm fine, don't worry about it. I'm saying go see them. Or at least FaceTime them so you can see that face. Because we all know the face that I'm talking about. We're talking about that facade that they put up. the facade that says, yeah, I'm fine. And you can see that their face is trying to crack, that there's something there in their eyes is just not that happiness. Check on your people. And those of us who do struggle, get your support team and use them. Use them absolutely 100% because that's what they're there for. Your friends, at least for me, my friends, I signed up to be your friend no matter what. I will be there with you. You call me and say, hey, Deb, I need to talk. I will pick up the phone and I will call you. I will go into the chat so that we can see each other and we can talk. That happens. I think another reason why I chose to come back to this subject, and we've talked about it several times on my podcast, is that unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, I think it's actually been a month now, my nephew, who graduated from high school 2 weeks prior, took his own life. And nobody knew outside the immediate family that he had even struggled with mental health. Nobody knew. He left a note and said, Mom and Dad, don't try to find me because by the time you do, I will be gone. And he was correct. By the time they found him, he was gone. And I struggled so hard for so long. It had to have been a week or two before I was even making sense. My support system rallied around me. And they would make sure I was on streams and they were checking on me and they would make sure that I was okay and I was getting better and I was accepting the things that I didn't want to accept. And I was accepting the fact that, my nephew was gone and there was nothing I could do about it. And it was difficult because I'm a mental health advocate. And all I kept thinking is if I had reached out more, maybe I would have found out that he had a mental health disorder. And those are the pressures that we put on ourselves. And that is why for everyone, your support team is your lifeline. Okay. Sometimes it can be a lot easier to mask looking angry than smiling. Absolutely. I'm absolutely 100% with you. Sometimes you just hurt so much that the only thing you can do is think to strike out and strike back because that is the only feeling that you have. Andrew says, exactly. I'm with you, Andrew, on that one. I don't ask as a social nicety either. If I ask you, how are you doing? I want the truth. If you're doing shitty and you're having a bad day, tell me. I'm having a really bad day. Okay, what can I do? Can we talk? Should we get some coffee? Should you just want to sit and talk for a few minutes? That's who I am, and that's what I do. And, a couple of people that are my support system have seen me do that. Just sit down with people, random strangers, and say, are you okay? And, sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But, we really have to put that effort out there to not only take care of ourselves, but to try to take care of the people in our lives. Because you never know when a mental health, you'll take a dip into the depression. Situational depression is an absolute real thing. Seasonal depression is a real thing. And just because you have one of those two things, it doesn't mean you have chronic depressive disorder like I do. But it is real. Those feelings are real. Yeah, exactly. That's right here. Mental health is untalked about part of my family tree. I am with you, Ox. Every single, and I am not exaggerating, Ox, every single woman on my mother's side of the family has been on some form of depression medication from her 20s to whenever she passed away. It runs deep. And I had no idea that was happening. When I started having depression symptoms, nobody talked about it. I had no idea. That's very true, Mange. People can seem happy and content before committing suicide. And I almost feel like, and this sounds terrible, but I almost feel like there's a relief when they decide I'm going to do this and the pressure's not there anymore. You're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to kill myself. And it's all going to be gone. All the pain, everything. It almost, I would think, I don't know for sure, I would think that there is a sense of relief where they can actually go like, it's almost over. It's almost over. And that's sad. It is sad and it's difficult for us to realize. But if you take a good look at some of the entertainers that have committed suicide and pictures hours before they committed suicide, laughing, happy looking, and then by the next day they were gone. So don't just assume that everything's okay. Check in on your friends, see how they're doing. Ox, yeah, I'm sorry you have to go through that, man, because it is rough. And unfortunately, all three of my children have inherited the genes for my mental health disorders. And it's very difficult for me as a mother to watch that happen with my kids. But, we check in and we support each other and we do what we have to do to make sure that we are all okay. And, that's what works for us. We check in. If we haven't heard from anybody in 48 hours, we automatically check in and start calling around, make sure everybody's doing okay, because it's that important to my family. And I know how rampant it is, because my children lived with me when my depression was out of control and I wasn't on the right medication. I wasn't doing the right things. And so it was very difficult for them to watch me go through that. And I don't ever want them to have to go through that kind of stuff, Yeah, Mange, I agree with you. It's that sense of relief. And it's hard to talk about but I get it. I mean, I get it. I do. Because when you're in pain and you're mentally or physically and you're in pain and you just for example, you have an operation that's going to stop your back pain. Okay. And you wake up, you go into surgery and you're like, oh, thank God, this is almost over. I will not have this debilitating pain anymore. I would think that is that same thought process, because the pain of a mental illness is just as debilitating, if not more, than a physical ailment. You can't see my mental or my physical ailments most of the time, but they're debilitating sometimes. And that is why I try to do this channel, so that we can be out there supporting each other and doing the kinds of things that we need to do to make a support system and to help a support system and to encourage those who have that public eye, that are in the public eye and they deal with these issues, to be public about it. If you can come out and you can talk about it, or just, say, this is what I struggle with. And I know this is a very personal decision. I'm not saying this is for everybody. I'm just encouraging the thought process of the people who have the public eye, who are role models for our children. Saying that they struggle with these kind of things is really going to bring a normality to mental health disorders. And by normality, I don't mean that it's not going to be a struggle anymore and everybody's just going to be, oh, okay, no big deal. It is a big deal, but it will make the awareness out there. And that's, I would say, 90% of the struggle is to get the awareness up so that we can get to the doctors, we can get the right kind of medications, we can get to therapy, have our insurance cover our meds, cover our therapy, cover the things that we need to do to be in the right mind frame so that we can be productive in our own lives. And I think that is one of the main reasons that I decided to do this today, is that I want it to be known, and I want people to look at the people that are in the public eye. When they come out and say they struggle with these things, share it. It shouldn't be, all these years ago this happened. Well, no, 2020 this happened. In 2021, or is it 2020? I think it's 2021. Michael Phelps started his foundation, and I feel terrible because I was not aware of it until probably about 4 or 5 months ago. And he is literally helping. He found the problem and he's doing exactly what I'm talking about. He knows the problem and he's putting together a place where people who have the problems that he has, after doing the things that he's done, can come and get therapy, get medication, get whatever they need, get training, because they have no job skills because they've been athletes their whole lives. What do you do? So he found the problem and he's putting together things that can give a solution to people that, competed on the level that he competed on. Now, if that becomes normalized, I believe in my heart of hearts that it will become easier for people who are not in the spotlight to get the mental health help that they need. Make sure insurances are paying for it. Make sure that we're looking at all the things going on in our society and how they can affect our mental health. And that's what's really important, is seeing the need and realizing that when these things happen to us, it affects your mental health. You get a divorce, it affects your mental health. you come to the realization that you are now going to come out and be your true self and live your true self. The years that you were in denial cause damage to your mental health. You're going to need to get therapy. You're going to need help getting over those kinds of things, you know? That's absolutely 100% Mange. I suffer from complex PTSD. So I have this happen to me a lot, and in ways of flashback and nightmares. And it does. It puts you in a state where you're scared. You feel that scared, but then the next day you wake up and you're depressed again because you realize, fuck, I just went through that. And it feels like it is absolutely happening all over again. Okay. And yes, Aunt Jur, Beck is rocking his producer skills tonight. He is absolutely. But that, as always, I would be nowhere without my producer. He gets things rolling. He's teaching me, and I'm very grateful for Beck as my producer, and I'm also very grateful for Beck as my friend and in my circle. He is my circle of support. Absolutely, a lot of you are that are in the chat right now. So that is my stance on mental health and athletes, because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more we can begin to normalize things for a new generation, because people are idolizing these people and they have to realize that that's what they are. They're just people who have people who are in the spotlight, and they're going to say they have these mental health disorders. We're going to see younger people who idolize them to come up and say, gosh, if this happens to them, it can happen to me. Or any other, yes, absolutely, 100%. We talked about that, Stephanie. We're talking about Ali Rasmussen. She was one of the people who has been open and honest about her struggles with depression, anxiety, and PTSD because of the doctor and the things that happened to them. Because again, I have to point out, these aren't women in gymnastics. Some of them are very young girls. And a lot of people say, well, if they're menstruating, they're women. Not technically. Yes, technically, yes, they are. But these are athletes who have been sheltered from dating and parties and all of that stuff. They haven't had the normal teenage existence. So yeah, it was a very big, huge blow to the mental health of those girls. Absolutely, 100%. All right, you guys got any questions, comments, or concerns for me? If you do, great, put them in there, and Beck will pull them up for me. He's good like that. But I think that that is all I have for tonight. And I just want to thank everybody for coming out and supporting me and supporting my channel. I know this is a little different from what I normally do, but I thought it was important. And you're right, Andrew, a lot of female athletes do not menstruate because of the low body fat and hormonal imbalances that go on in their body. This also happens to women who are anorexic and bulimic as well, which is, again, something that can happen with those types of sports for young women. All right, y'all, I am going to take off. There is no after party tonight. I'm going to just ask and encourage everybody to head over to Overprotective Atheist. She is streaming at 8 o'clock on Twitch. So if you could head over there and give her a big hello for me, I will be over there shortly. But as always, take care of yourselves, love yourselves, and remember you're perfect just the way you are. See y'all next week.